This is the first video in a series I'll be making about how to make currency at the start of a league. Essence is my favorite league start farming strategy. I started out doing Ultimatum in Affliction League, and after I wasted most of the first week with it, I switched to this strategy, old reliable essences, and I used it to get back on track. Notice for the disclaimer here, this is not a comprehensive guide to essence farming. It's not the only approach you can take with essences either. This is just what I think is important for a player doing this strategy at league start to know in order to make currency quickly and easily. Hi, it's Lerald, and I'm going to talk about how to farm essences, but before I do, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, let's talk about this strategy and what makes it special. It's just a really easy way to farm currency, and it can be done with very little gear. In terms of what it creates, it makes a valuable crafting currency, essences. Essences more or less work like chaos orbs. You can slam them onto a piece of gear, and if they're lower level essences, they work like an alchemy, but higher level ones will work like a chaos, where they will reforge an item with a guaranteed stat on it, and then random stats other than that. So they're useful for crafting, especially if you have some stat that you really want to force onto an item, like say movement speed on boots. And they can be really good in conjunction with fractured stats, because then you have some sort of fractured attribute, a guaranteed attribute there, then you're guaranteeing another attribute with an essence, and then you can combine that with other crafting techniques to make a pretty nice piece of gear. Essences are a currency that gain in value throughout a league, but farming essences at the start of a league is still a really good way to get your gear off the ground. Essences are generally used in large quantities for in-game crafts, so having a larger supply of them will make every single one of them more valuable. Is farming essences fun? I think so. I think it's one of the more fun strategies because it is so simple and straightforward. You kill the guys, you loot their stuff. That's pretty much it. In terms of the cost of setting up this strategy, there are no scarabs, so that's no cost right there. There's only one sextant that exists. It adds one essence mob into your maps, and it gives all essences a 50% chance to be corrupted. This can be useful for farming up a supply of Remnants of Corruption. That's these red essence looking things that corrupt essences. And it's kind of useful early when you're ultra poor and probably can't afford the sextant, but it's actually kind of bad once you are able to afford the sextant. Basically, you probably don't want to use the sextant. You can, but I prefer not to. As for the map device, should you use essence in the map device? Yes, it costs 2 chaos and it adds 2 essences. That's a pretty good trade. It's not absolutely necessary, but once you're able to afford adding 2 chaos into the cost of each map, you should definitely do it. In terms of profitability, it's great for crafting gear for yourself. It's great for selling to other players. That's really all this strategy does, though. It doesn't really create a lot of bubblegum currency or really have a lot of interactions with other stuff. It's pretty easy to sell what this strategy makes, though, and it doesn't require any sort of third-party sites like TFT, but there are sections on TFT for bulk selling entire essence tabs all at once, and that is a very quick way to unload all of your essences. In terms of how you sell the currency, I do have one little trick for selling them, and I'll show that off here. I think I might have unlisted all of my stuff. I'll just turn on T&D just to make sure I don't get spammed. Okay, so let's say I've looked it up and I found that at a supply of like 50 or more deafening essences of contempt, they all sell for 5 chaos each. Now, I could just list them at 5 chaos each, like this. Ta-da, they're 5 chaos each. But then I'm going to get spammed up by people who want to buy 1 essence at a time. So the better way to do it, because they stack in stacks of 9, for whatever reason, is to list them as 45 divided by 9. So instead of being 5 chaos each, they are 45 chaos for 9 of them. Basic math, that's still the same price. They're still selling for 5 chaos each, but people will have to message me to buy them 9 at a time. So that's very easy for me to sell them. They are buying 1 stack at a time, and it's kind of easy for them to buy them too, because they don't have to like sit there and make sure that, you know, is that a 8 or a 3 or whatever. Like, they can just know that they're getting 9 at a time as well. You're just doing full stacks, so it makes it all pretty easy to trade. So I like to sell all of my essences all the time in stacks of 9 at a time. Another important thing here is that they, as I said before, are more valuable the more you have, because by selling a lot of them, at a time, you are saving people time spent buying 5 from this guy and 2 from that guy and so on. So you're able to charge a premium for having a large supply. This is good, but it means that if you have a large supply, you want to be sure you're not pricing them at the same price that people are pricing 1 or 2 essences at a time, or you may wind up costing yourself a lot of chaos. You know, if these are selling for like 2 chaos each in very small quantities and 6 chaos in large quantities, and I list them all for like, let's say I listed them all for 20 for 9. I'm selling them all for less than 2.5 chaos each. They're going to sell instantly, and I'm going to have cost myself a couple dozen chaos, at least 100 plus chaos, depending on how many I have. That would be bad. Another important note here is that you want to generate a good supply of essences all in one sort of a session, and then set aside dedicated buying and selling periods rather than trying to map and then getting pulled out of the map where you're trying to farm essences to sell 1 stack of them, and then you go back in and you farm a couple more essences, and then in that same map you get pulled out to sell 1 more stack. You kind of want to alternate between selling them and farming them, and a way to handle that is just literally to turn off that tab as being public when you're doing farming, and then once you decide it's sell time, to treat that as a gameplay mode the same way that you do farming in maps, where okay, it's time to sell. I'm going to turn my tabs on public and actually sell the stuff that's in them. And that's kind of a good approach to take. In terms of the time investment, this is a really fast strategy. It does pull you away from Atlas progression, which is probably the biggest issue with it. As for the Atlas nodes, let's go ahead and take a look here. I have a bit of a hybrid Atlas going here where I'm combining some essence stuff and some bestiary stuff. That's a bit of a spoiler for a future video. But as we can see, the essence nodes are actually pretty easy to path to. There's prolific essence, which just adds an essence into your map, which it's very cheap to get to. That's useful. There's crystal lattice and the small nodes on the way to it, which just make it so that imprisoned monsters in your maps have a higher chance to hold essences. There's crystal resonance, which makes it so that essences that have a shrieking essence, that is this essence, the tier 2 essence, are duplicated. So instead of getting 1 shrieking essence at a time, you're always going to get double shrieking essences, and then they'll duplicate whatever else is on that. So if you are able to get some of the more valuable essences, those will also be duplicated. That's very nice. It also has the added bonus of making it so that corrupting imprisoned monsters in your maps with Remnant of Corruption won't cause them to automatically release, which is good. And finally, amplified energies just makes all of the essences in your maps be 1 tier higher, which just means that they're all basically 3 times more valuable than if you didn't have amplified energies. So it's a pretty good point to have, because you're able to vendor any essence. You know, you can just use the stash tab to automatically upgrade, but you can simulate this if you don't have the stash tab by taking these essences. Like, I'll take these 4 essences, I'll sell them to a vendor, and he converts 3 of them into the one that's 1 tier higher, and then he just hands me back the other one. No problem. So you can sell them 3 to 1 or upgrade them, and they all either way upgrade 3 into the next tier. Now you'll note that I have a couple of them that I haven't upgraded, and the reason for that is Shrieking Essences of Zeal. I think the main use for them, at least for me, is upgrading boots. As you can see, boots get 30% increased move speed from Shrieking Essences and 32 from Deafening Essences. So there are still some uses for Deafening Essences, like making gloves, like attack speed gloves. Those are really valuable. Attack speed on weapon, a melee weapon getting 28 to 30% attack speed is actually higher than the native attack speed roll that you can get. So Deafening Essences of Zeal are really good for making melee weapons and gloves. But for boots, Shrieking Essence of Zeal is kind of all you need. So I like to just farm Deafening Essences of Zeal, maybe buy some if I'm going to do a craft, and then similarly Screaming Essences of Dread and Shrieking and whatever. Like, I prefer not to upgrade the Dread Essences because they're just kind of like, they throw life onto a piece of gear. It's nice to be able to just grab some of these and slap life onto a piece of gear just to kind of get a character rolling when I'm leveling something up. So I tend to hang on to the Screaming Essences of Dread and not upgrade those all the way up to Deafening. You can, but you tend to lose some money by upgrading Greeds, and you tend to lose a little bit by upgrading Shrieking Essences of Zeal all the way up to Deafening. All the rest of them you can pretty much upgrade. Shrieking Essences of Dread is the one other outlier. The main craft from this is bows getting +2 to level of socketed bow gems, and if I take 3 of these and sell them to a vendor just for demonstration purposes. As you can see here, side by side, it's the same affix. +2 to level of socketed bow gems, it's the same, regardless of whether it's Shrieking or Dread, there's no point in upgrading. Okay, in terms of difficulty, essences are basically just rare modifiers on steroids, so an enemy with bad rare mods and a lot of essence mods can be kind of dangerous for a league start character. We offset this by doing low tier maps, and we run the maps white. As you can see, this is a perfect map for doing essence farming. I'm just going to throw it in and kind of keep talking as I'm going. Just to demonstrate here, you only need to be in an area that has a zone level of 68 or higher for essences to work at maximum effectiveness, and a tier 1 map is a 68 area, so we're just going to kind of run this. This is a kind of a terrible tier 1 map. I don't have any glacier maps, unfortunately, and all I'm really doing here is I'm just looking on my map for that blue little like that blue little emblem there, which will indicate that there's an essence here. Now, there aren't any super valuable essences that I really want to corrupt, but there are 4 or more essences on this, so I'll hit it with a Remnant of Corruption just to see if it turns into anything. It didn't. That's fine. So like, I guess I'll loot all of this just for the sake of that gameplay loop, but yeah, obviously we're at the end of the league here and I'm on a very geared character, so it's not like I need any of these bad boys, but this is pretty much the extent of the gameplay loop, right? It's super basic, and I mean, I love it because it is something that obviously this character is able to fly through the maps and really get after it. But you can do this on like a level 75 Toxic Rain Pathfinder that's got a modicum of gear. Maybe it has like a 4-link Quill Rain, but that's kind of all you got going on. And it still works pretty well because there's no map mods. It's a tier 1 map. You know, this is not content that's like significantly more difficult than certainly not as difficult as some of the mobs on the way to like Kitava. Oh, I guess one thing I should actually explicitly say here is that essences don't scale their rewards with quantity or rarity. And that is why we want to run these maps on just as white maps, tier 1 maps. You can do higher tier, but there's just no point to it. It makes it slower and they're not any more rewarding. They're equally rewarding whether you're on a T16 juice map or you're doing a T1 white map, so why make it take any longer, right? Now I want to talk about the one little wrinkle of complexity that Essence has. Whenever you find an Essence mob, you can apply this item right here. I just demonstrated in the last map, a Remnant of Corruption. This has a couple of outcomes that can occur. It can just do nothing. I mean, that's pretty normal with corruption items, just doing nothing. It can immediately free the essence, but we take the Atlas passive Crystal Resonance, so that possibility is removed. Hello, essence. And the other possibilities are that it will add an essence, or it will re-roll these, or it will upgrade their tier. Now, nice. See, I just made 3 deafening essences there out of this. That's exactly what we're looking for. Basically just increase the value of all the essences that we would have gotten. I mean, that is the kind of thing that would be really, really awesome to have happen at a league start. Also, that's funny, finding a mana reservation efficiency of skills fractured helm at league start would be pretty nice too. And that is another thing that can occur when you're dealing with essence mobs, is sometimes they will have essence modifier items drop, and sometimes those items will be fractured with that essence modifier being something kind of good. That one was a low roll, but still, that kind of thing showing up at the start of a league can be really good. Okay, another thing I really wanted to show off here, and I'm glad it happened in this map, is purple essences. So there are 4 purple essences, and I've written them down. They are Scorn, Envy, Misery, and Dread, and using a Remnant of Corruption on them can turn that into one of the 4 corrupted essences, which are Insanity, Horror, Delirium, and Hysteria. This is the only way to get those 4 special essences. They all have powerful effects. They're all substantially more valuable and more rare than normal essences, because the only way you can get them to appear is by slapping a purple essence with a Remnant of Corruption, and unfortunately, it didn't happen. That's okay. So when should you use the Remnants of Corruption? Whenever an essence mob has a purple essence, you use that, period. I also like to use them on essence mobs that have 4 essences or more, even if none of them are purple, just in the hopes of getting the tiers on the essences to roll up to deafening. Now, you can use them on every single essence, but I think for ones that have fewer than 4, I think it's a little wasteful, because, you know, it might not do anything. And this is basically a couple of chaos at league start. A Remnant of Corruption is worth about 1 or 2 chaos Probably. So I don't know, kind of don't want to throw that away on something that has no real chance of giving a reasonable return, right? Like why would I do this? This is a waste of money. Yeah, see? Obvious waste of money. Don't do that. In terms of how you farm Remnants of Corruption for yourself, there are really only the two ways. I already mentioned the Sextant, which really isn't all that great. There's also these two small nodes here, Remnant of Corruption Essence Chance on the right side of this wheel. They give you a 10% chance to have Remnants of Corruption in your maps. At League start, I like to go along the right side here and take those two. As I've progressed into getting some currency built up and getting a stockpile of Remnants of Corruption, I like to move out of those and take these two over here that just give you a chance to have extra essences on your imprisoned monsters. The problem with these bonuses and the problem with the Sextant is that the pre-corrupted essences in your maps can't be corrupted. You know, they already are. And that means they can't have the 4 special corrupted essences because you can't have an essence spawn in with that. So you're sacrificing the potential of corrupting purple essences to just get more Remnants of Corruption, basically, and they really aren't worth all that much themselves. Their real value is being able to gamble on upgrading the essences that you find in your map. So it's really not a great trade-off to like run those nodes or to run the Sextant outside of the very beginning of doing this strategy. Okay, one other thing I did want to mention here about farming essences, just a very simple thing, is that when you tap the essences, it actually takes a couple of taps to break them out of the crystal prison. As you can see, I've just left clicked it twice. You can see the crystals are they're trembling. They're about to break free. So you have the ability to, on any build that's able to like pre-cast, preload a bunch of damage. So we're talking trappers, miners, toxic rain, things like that are able to layer out some ground effects. You can go ahead and give them like a couple of taps or not, but whatever. You can preload that damage and then break them out and just watch them immediately melt and throw that sweet, sweet gear at your feet. All right, so let's talk about when you should try to do this strategy. This is a pretty good strategy for making currency fairly early on in a league. Now, the thing is that essence mobs at the absolute beginning of hitting maps are actually going to be pretty brutal. So this isn't something you really want to do like literally the moment you hit maps. But it is something that you can transition into very early on. Like basically as soon as you're comfortably doing yellow maps or even like red maps, you can absolutely go through and just blow the brakes off of any of these essence mobs that you're finding in tier 1 maps with no alch and go or anything going on. Generally speaking, I like to kind of progress through the in-game quest line and get a little bit of gear, a little bit of levels under my character's belt before I go doing like this sort of a farm strategy. I'm really just trying to kind of progress up toward getting those watchstones, but this is something you can do along the way to get yourself a little bit more currency, make yourself a little bit more gear and make that process easier. So ultimately your mileage will vary a little bit as to exactly when you feel comfortable starting to do this, but I think it's a strategy you can jump onto pretty early on and basically ride it out as long as you want to. There's never really a point where farming essences stops being good. It just gets outclassed by things that are able to scale up at higher levels better than it does. But as far as easy, low cost money makers go, it's pretty amazing. Now, one final thing I want to close on here is stash tabs. Do you need to have a stash tab for this strategy? I would say that having the Essence tab helps a lot with organizing, sorting, and upgrading your essences. It also really helps with selling them. I would recommend getting one if you're going to run this strategy at League Start. I think that having the stash tab will save you a lot of time, effort, and space, and it'll justify spending some of that real world money on the Essence stash tab. So, you know, it's not mandatory, but the quality of life that it provides you is super high. And as always, I think, you know, whenever you're going to buy any stashes, they do run stash tab sales really often. Usually it's the weekend after the league comes out. So if you're thinking about saving a few dollars, I would wait for that. All right, that's it. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and thank you for watching. Have fun farming essences. Bye.